Hey everybody, Travis here with AV Nirvana. I have a really exciting new product here in-house. It's just kind of hitting the market now. It's the SVS 3000 In Wall Subwoofer System. It's a dual 9-inch sealed in-wall cabinet that comes with a separate rack mount amplifier. And before I install it, I had a few questions, and so I thought the best way to get those addressed and to answer some similar questions that y'all may have was to bring in the experts. So I have here Ed Mullen from SVS Sound and Chris Seymour from Seymour-Screen Excellence and Seymour AV, who manufactured my screen. So let's start off with this. I have a really easy situation for installing this sub on my front wall. It's a false wall. It's 2x4 construction in front of my main wall. The screen is the Seymour AV proscenium screen with motorized masking and the center stage UF material. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, these do make it so much more flexible as to where you put the sub. Obviously, we have to, continue to consider where the best location for a sub may be, with it, the way it interacts with the room. But I'm wondering, with all the flexibility we gain, is it worth trying to raise it and put it behind the screen? What sort of challenges do we have if we try to put, a sub behind the screen?
Well, I can kick that off with respect to a placement. The 3000 InWall is a fully enclosed subwoofer, so you can actually move it around the room and try a bunch of different locations to see which measures and sounds the best. So in that sense, it's no different than a conventional subwoofer with respect to placement. And once you've found the best location, obviously secondary considerations are running wiring to it and connecting the amplifier. To speak to your question about the height of the subwoofer, yes, there is a floor to ceiling standing wave pattern. And you may notice if you're sitting and listening to music, if you stand up, the bass often changes. And that's because you're moving your head through the standing wave pattern from floor to ceiling. Similarly, because acoustics are reciprocal, if you elevate the subwoofer off the ground relative to a fixed listening position or a fixed head height, you can change the frequency response of the sub because you're moving it through the floor to ceiling standing wave pattern. So in that sense, sure, there's a benefit possibly of moving the sub up and finding that best location both around the room and, of course, from a height standpoint.
And obviously, a sub moves a lot more air than my LCRs, and we have to pay attention to the screen materials and the distance between a sub and the actual screen material. So, Chris, you want to talk about
that? So with a traditional projection screen that's not acoustically transparent, then that's considered no man's land, and you can put your acoustics around it, which is why we see a lot of the left and right on there and some horizontal thing underneath. That's a pretty common configuration. But the neat thing about when the screen is acoustically transparent is then it's no longer allergic to the audio. The two can each be optimized however is best. And so we say, let's pretend you have no video at all. How would you set up your audio system? Where would the subs be located? Where would the left, center, right be located? Identical match. There's a lot of acoustic benefits that you can do when the screen is no longer allergic to the audio. And then once you put the screen on top, ideally, then that's going to be solved. But we're going to go through some of the arguments then, because Travis could put it on the floor or the corners, but with such flexibility as the 3000 offers, why not consider putting it behind the screen as well, just for the academic exercise of what are the landmines, how would you do that, and that's kind of what we're going to get into more detail about.
Awesome. So you have some slides here. We want to go through those quick, just to talk about some of those mathematical challenges and considerations, but you promised me there would be no math.
No, no math. That's right. That's one of my policies. I try not to do math in public. It doesn't go well. So this is a good picture of a nice dedicated room. And with these dedicated rooms, you can then use white screen materials. Then why wouldn't you use acoustically transparent? And so in this one picture here, we're showing this montage, if you will, of a fade of a movie, and then a proper left, center, right placement behind the screen as well, just to show the acoustical transparency in this configuration. Just like the screen is no longer allergic to the audio is no longer allergic to the screen. So you can make it however high or low you want, however big you want. You can go floor to ceiling. So there's a lot of visual best practices you can chase in this type of situation. So let's go ahead and go through what are the parameters that we take into account to answer that question, subwoofers behind the screen, because a lot of installers will just say, no, don't do it. And they can be right. And then a lot of other installers can say, yes, we do it all the time. And they can also be right. So we're gonna thread the needle here to kind of give you the guidance on that. Academically, the things to think about is the number one is what kind of airflow is being generated by the sub. And not getting too mathy, but there's a simple equation. This is the easy one. And it's just the excursion of the driver times its surface area of the driver, and then C is the speed of sound. And we'll go to the next consideration, is the air permeability of the screen material itself. And so that's where we'll kind of talk about, this is something that's easy to find, but it requires some setup to measure. And again, we're just going to step through some academic arguments and then kind of get to just some casual, practical conversation. Then the next slide there, what percentage of the airflow is actually going through the screen? And subs are generally omnidirectional, but some of the energy may go into the screen depending on the assumptions of the driver type and so forth. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The screen area that is concerned. We have customers that have literally their entire screen wall behind there is transducers. Otherwise, we have others that are more modest, and so that depends on the distance of the drive unit to the screen and its surface area. But we're talking, how much screen area really are we talking about here? And then finally, the question is, what's the limit of the visual screen displacement? And the hint there is that it's frequency dependent. The high-frequency transducers are actually put onto screens in some commercial applications because those laser projectors can be really sparkly. And so they'll actually vibrate the screen really higher frequency, so you can't tell, but it kind of dithers the image and gets rid of that sparkle. We don't have that problem in consumer applications much because very few people are using direct RGB laser projectors. And our woven materials are actually designed to naturally desparkle that as well. But it's an interesting thing that, some screen vibration is okay. Some is obviously too much. And we'll let's get into some practical considerations of that. So here's a picture of Seaton Sound, Mark Seaton. He's installing a Star Wars theme-based theater in the Chicago area with F1 audio. And he's putting 8 18-inch speakers. I guess 6 of them are going to be behind the screen. But this was a learning example for us because we really got to play with, how many inches from the screen is good. These are sealed drivers like the new SVS 3000. So I thought that was an appropriate kind of picture that, if you did do this and more of them, what are you going after here, and what to consider. Let's go to that next slide. With the guideline that woven screens are going to have a much easier time of integrating these subwoofers than perforated vinyl. It's just they're far more air permeable, more breathable, so you just don't run into the issue near as easily. You can space those speakers inches away from the screen as opposed to feet away from the screen when it's perforated vinyl, and it's just the nature of the product. Really, a woven screen is a 3-dimensional product. A perforated vinyl screen is a 2-dimensional. So that's getting into the mechanics of it. The second thing to consider is are there your left, center, rights? If those are behind the screen, all of them, one of them, and if they're crossed over, that's really easy. Because again, we're talking about bass as really the issue in doing this. And we design our material to hang right over the in-wall mains with about an inch effective spacing. Now it's going to be a little close for subs, but that LCR is easy to do. The third issue that's the big one. That's the airflow. That is the main issue. A sealed sealed design like the 3000 is better than ported. So if you are going to put subs in your image area, and there's aesthetic reasons to do that. There's acoustics reasons to do that as well. But go for a sealed design. It's going to have an easier time. If you do have to do a ported, just don't fire the port right into the screen. Or if you have to, can you rotate that 90 degrees? But then the only other solution left is just to keep increasing the space between the screen and the speaker. It doesn't hurt. More airspace is always fine. It's just you're eating into room space that can be had. And then fourth is sufficient power level and a low frequency. Some infrasonics and structural vibrations can start to come into play, where we see not only the projector's mounts bouncing, but the screen wall, the baffle wall bouncing. And so you can just get into structural vibration where it doesn't much matter the screen itself, just because you're moving all sorts of things. And then we've found practically, like an example in that Star Wars theater that we were showing, the visibility of the wave, if it's centered onto the screen, you're just kind of diaphragming the screen, and it's not visible much at all because you're not distorting anything. The most visible screen effect is if you're firing into perfed final screens at the bottom corners or at the center, and then what happens then is that propagates waves across the image, more like a wave pool, and then those become very, very visible. But you'll know that real quickly. Mm. And then on this last slide is here, if you do it right, you'll be a happy guy like Mark there. So that's what everybody wants.
So you did mention that there are some acoustic benefits to, raising up the subs at the same level as the LCR. But bass is non-directional. Give me the 101 on that. What benefit do I see by trying to put them behind the screen versus just putting them, at floor level like I would normally do with a standard sub?
Well, it depends on the crossover frequency between the LCR and the subwoofer. There's going to be obviously blending between the speakers and the sub. If the LCR is dynamically capable into the mid-bass region, then you can get away with a crossover of, say, 80 hertz or even 60 hertz, at which point the sub becomes largely non-directional. But there's something to be said for locking the bass to the front stage, especially when deep male voices are playing, and it's sort of the undertones are being split between the center channel and the subwoofer. If the sub was behind you and the crossover was sufficiently high, let's say you're using a tiny center channel and you're running 150 hertz crossover, you would hear the deep male voices sort of mumbling out of the subwoofer in the back of the room, and that would give kind of a vague or disembodied sense to the bass and the male voice. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits is number one, running capable LCR speakers. Number two, having a reasonably deep crossover, maybe 80 or even 60 hertz, and then the sub becomes non-localizable, but also is very coherently matched to the front stage and locking the deep male voices and other sound effects to the screen.
And when it comes to the materials, obviously, you need a little bit of distance there, but subs are also so much, the bass frequencies, I guess, are just so much more easy to do things with. My LCRs would not sound the same and you can't, my hands are cut off here, but if I aimed the left and right at a 90-degree angle towards the center of the screen, it's not going to sound right. With my sub, it's at the end of the couch back here, facing, aiming straight at the right wall, and it sounds fantastic. It's the SVS PB-2000. So there are, you have a lot more flexibility with what you put in front of of a sub. Am I correct with that? So in theory, I could maybe even test it behind the velvet draping that I have blacking out underneath the screen.
Sure. You can move it around the room. I know AV Nirvana is the home of Room EQ Wizard, and that's one of the most popular software programs out there for advanced enthusiasts to measure the in-room frequency response of their system. And we encourage that if you're going to experiment with subwoofer placement. It's sort of like an advanced version of the subwoofer crawl with empirical data. You can say, all right, I've got maybe 4 or 5 locations in the room where I could put the subwoofer, and I'm going to measure all of them and see which one measures and sounds the best and is the most accurate. One of the issues often that we encounter with front stage placement is simply the front to rear standing wave in the room. It's very persistent, and at some point in the middle of the room, there's typically a cancellation null. Hopefully you're not sitting in it. If you are, then it's very hard to correct for that. So we encourage moving the listening position if possible, or moving the subwoofer and simply shifting around that standing wave pattern in the room so the frequency response is more benign and flat, and then more accurate. The last thing you want to do is sort of try and correct for a big cancellation null by throwing a bunch of EQ at it. That stresses out the woofer, it stresses out the amplifier. And it dumps a bunch of energy into the room, increases your decay times, reverb times. There's a bunch of negatives associated with trying to fix nulls. So that's really my first line of defense is put the sub where it measures well at the listening position, and then the rest generally tends to fall into place.
Sure. And that's definitely something that I need to keep in mind, because my seating is very close to the middle of the room. It's main seating position, only seating position. The couch is at about 9.5 feet, and the room is about 23 feet deep. So pretty close to that center of the room, but that because I have to have my office back here, that's just kind of how it worked. Another thing that we had discussed in a previous conversation, I'm going to pull up this shot just so the grill for this that snaps on with magnets. You had mentioned that could also be potentially used as a diffuser when putting it just to minimize that air push if it were behind the screen. Is that it, adding another layer of something between the screen and between the listening position and the sub driver?
Sure. I think the effect's minor. It's the screen itself's designed to be high airflow, high perforation. So, but to the extent it does occur, you're going to get some diffusion and spreading out of the airflow from the subwoofer through the grill, through more parts of the grill instead of just directly from the woofers. Another thing to think about with a sealed subwoofer, cone excursion quadruples with each successively lower octave at the same sound pressure. So, say you're playing 100 dB at 80 hertz, play 100 dB at 40 hertz, that's 4 times more cone excursion. And then 100 dB at 20 hertz is 4 times more excursion again. So now, at the deepest frequencies, like Chris was alluding to earlier, those are the ones that create the most airflow because the woofer's moving back and forth the farthest and displacing the most amount of air. And then you start to see, aberrations on the screen, or even in my own theater, I can get the whole room shaking to the point where the projector is vibrating, the screen's vibrating. And again, that's your infrasonic output at high SPLs that just wreaks havoc with the entire room.
Right. And this isn't going to be one of those SVS subs that's going to hit at 15, 16, 17 hertz. What's the low extension on this? Isn't it like 27, I think? Is that somewhat out of the danger zone of having a big impact on the
Well, I think it's important to lead with, we rate all of our subs quasi-anechoic. We measure them all outdoors, away from reflective structures, in a ground plane environment. So that's the most conservative extension rating for the subwoofer. Sealed subwoofers in particular take really good advantage of a phenomenon called room gain, where the room can actually augment the output of the subwoofer at the deepest frequencies. So in-room extension for the 3000 InWall will be considerably deeper than that. But to answer your question, are you going to see high output from the 3000 InWall, at 15 or 20 hertz? No, not as much as one of our larger ported subs tuned to 16 hertz, for example.
Sure, and just so the viewers are aware, this also comes in people are ordering them in different configurations. I have the single subwoofer system, which is the rack mount amp at 800 watts, and a single enclosure with the two 9-inch, and they're both active drivers. There's not a passive driver in there.
Yep.
It can also be ordered as a dual subwoofer system, which you can't just add a second cabinet, correct?
That's right. The duals system has unique changes to the drivers, and in particular the voice coils, to work with the one amplifier. So it's two subwoofers, both now getting 400 watts a piece from the same amplifier. There's a switch on the back of the amp that you can set for the duals. And then, I guess the ultimate would be, if you wanted to go for this, would be two singles. If you have the rack space, you could have two 800 watt amps and two subwoofers, and that will give you, the highest dynamic output. The dual system has been incredibly popular for us, and it really surprised me is how well it's selling. And it just speaks to the benefits of putting two subwoofers in the room at strategic locations to help fill in that standing wave pattern and get a smoother frequency response at more listening positions. So it's a great benefit. You get more headroom, smoother bass, less localizable bass, all sorts of wins from the dual system.
What can I be expecting, knowing that I'm going from a PB-2000 that's probably 10 years old to a completely different type of subwoofer? What can I expect as far as sound quality once I get it dialed in and configured?
I think you're going to be very impressed with the detail, the articulation, the tightness, the musicality, frankly, the output as well. The 3000 InWall has surprisingly high output and a lot of punch. The only time I think you'd notice a difference would be the PB-2000 being a very large ported subwoofer. Simply is going to have more sheer output at 18, 20, 25 hertz. And that's just the physics of the design. It's not really a knock against the 3000 InWall. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's very much playback level dependent. At some point, the PB-2000 can simply play louder at those deeper frequencies, but you may or may not realize that depending on the playback level. And again, remember, our sealed subs take great advantage of room gain, which augments output at the deepest frequencies. So I think you're going to be surprised at the overall performance envelope from the 3000 InWall. It's a bit of a magic trick, actually, when you're listening to it. Wow, that's coming from that InWall sub. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I'm excited to get it in and start playing around with it. Obviously, with my existing sub being ported, it's definitely pretty much a no-no to try and use both of them simultaneously. Even with a mini DSP, we're going to run into issues, right?
Yeah, the reason why is the phase response on a ported sub is quite reactive at the deeper frequencies where the port starts coming online. There's a lot of phase rotation. There's a big change in group delay. And that's not the case with the sealed subwoofer. So when you're trying to integrate the two in the room over that bandwidth, invariably you're going to see some phase anomalies, some phase cancellation, just some weirdness that you wouldn't otherwise see with two of the same exact subwoofer. So it just introduces another variable into the equation when you're integrating duals into the room that we would prefer not to face. So our recommendation is always use two of the same exact sub to make the integration and phasing easier.
Sure. Excellent. And just also to mention, to make sure the folks watching know that this is technically a custom installer. They're through SVS dealers. They really encourage you to go that route. But if you do really want to just get one, play around with it yourself and install it, Crutchfield is selling these direct to the consumer. So there is a way to get one and just play around with it like I'm about to do this weekend. But what would be the advantage? Is there a price difference to getting it direct or through?
The price is the same. This is one of those types of installations where it's probably beyond the capabilities of the average homeowner, and we want them to have a great experience with the 3000 InWall and use a qualified installation contractor to make sure everything's done perfectly and it sounds and looks amazing at the end. With that said, we do understand that there are enthusiasts out there with the proper experience and qualifications to do this themselves, and that's why we're offering it through Crutchfield as a direct purchase. And they're great. Crutchfield is a great retail partner for us, and they have huge amounts of experience with all sorts of in-wall installations, not just subwoofers, but speakers as well. And they can help walk that individual through the process. And of course, there's our own customer service department, and we can assist as well.
Right. So, Chris, are you getting ready to pick up a couple of these and have them lit up behind with the IMAX
Nice.
effect behind your screens?
We can, we'll change your screen material out for a little different one, but we can totally do that because I think you're going to want more than one after you experience what this is going to sound like.
Probably. Probably. I'm one of the things that really excites me most about this is because I'm not a huge bass head. Like, I'm not, rumble the whole house. Like, I enjoy impact and clarity, and I want it to sound like what I'm seeing. Sure, it's fun when the whole couch vibrates, but I've never been that, a sub in each corner and bass shakers under the couch. I've never been that much of a bass head. I'm more about accuracy and clarity, and so I'm excited to see what this will do just on its own.
And we can always add more if you need more dynamic output. And again, if you need to fill in some of those standing wave nulls in the room because you're sort of limited by your seating position and the room dimensions and your workspace, all those are real world considerations. I like to tell customers life's full of compromises, and subwoofer placement is no different. And these are often going into multimedia living room, family rooms, and there's just limitations we all have to deal with. And one of the best ways to overcome that is, well, let's throw another sub in the room and see if we can fill in some of those cancellation points on the frequency response.
Right. How would this go ahead, Chris.
No, I was gonna add to that I think what I'm excited about, what you're going to experiment with this is, I think you'll get a big jump in the cohesion of having this product. It's designed better to go up into upper bass. It's going to be faster. It's going to be just that cohesion when you lock that. And for me, when you're not listening to that sub-satellite sound, you're listening to a cohesive full range from each channel. And however, there's a lot of ways to pull that off. But for me, that really gets that suspension of disbelief, because then just everything's perfect. So,
and really, to speak to Travis's point and Chris's, if the subwoofer is too loud and too bombastic, it takes you out of the experience. It draws attention to itself. it needs to be well blended, and it needs to support the soundtrack. Yes, it should be powerful when it needs to be, and the soundtrack calls for it. But it should also fade into the background and not draw attention to itself. That's one of the sort of I guess the hallmarks of our products. I will be watching a movie in my reference theater downstairs, and I'll forget that I'm listening to a home theater system because I'm so immersed into the movie itself. And that's one of the greatest compliments you can pay to the entire audio system and the subwoofer is you forget you're listening to it. You're just experiencing the movie the way the director intended. And I think that speaks to Chris's point about how well integrated the speaker and the sub is. And, let's not forget about room treatments either, right? Panels, diffusers, bass traps, all of those things can help improve soundstage and cohesiveness and three-dimensionality and imaging that really takes it to the next level and gives you that immersive experience.
My favorite analogy, also because I like to cook for people, is that I feel like bass is like salt. You have to have it, and it has to be good. But there's this amount where you get a little bit too much. It's maybe fun for 5 minutes, but that kills the experience.
Yep.
Says the guy with how many subs in his basement?
I have a few.
But having watched films in your theater, Chris, if I didn't know how many subs were in that room, I wouldn't come out of there saying you've got a lot of bass down there. It's perfectly blended. So,
and that's the road that I think this 3000 is going to put you on. I'm really excited about you experiencing that.
Excellent. So here's actually another question that just popped into my head as we were talking about adding another one. If I didn't want to add another InWall, what would be like? What about the 3000 micro? If I wanted to fill a null in the room, something like that, or what would be the ideal non-InWall sub to pair with this?
I'd say, any of our small sealed subs, SB-1000 Pro would be a good choice. 3000 Micro would be a good choice. SB-2000 Pro, all compact, good performance, similar but not identical phase responses. At least you're not fighting that sealed versus ported issue we spoke about earlier. Once you get up to the SB-3000, SB-4000, well, you're getting into a fairly decent-sized subwoofer that may be getting away from the concept of hidden subwoofers or visually less intrusive subwoofers. So I'd say any of those models would be a good choice.
Yeah, because I first of all, I do love the idea of not seeing it. I want to watch the movie, not see my equipment. My equipment's all here in the back of the room. But that being said, the PB-2000 is not. It's not that I don't have room for it in the room. It's almost an end table at the end of the couch. It just sits there. It's at the perfect level. So it's not that I wouldn't have space to add another, an in-room sub. It's just it's an interesting. It's interesting to have this just a whole new level of options. Just getting another InWall and putting another amp down here and putting them between the left and center and between the right and center and just have that nice, horizontal plane of all the sound up there. But if I wanted to go an in route, if I wanted to save a little bit of money on the next one, I could potentially get a good sealed SVS that would blend nicely.
I think the applications we're going to see for the 3000 InWall would be, your high-end theme theaters like Chris was showing us earlier. Everything's hidden. There's a theme. You don't want speakers and subs sort of visually intrusive in the room. And then the other application, probably more common, would just be, sort of your high-end multimedia living room, family room, where it's an upscale decor, and you want to be heard but not seen. Speakers and subwoofers. You want great sound, but you don't want the traditional audio system sort of dominating the visual landscape and creating decor integration challenges. So I think that's really going to be incredibly popular with that particular segment of enthusiasts really looking for an amazing experience without the conventional audio system being visible.
And I think once you're liberated from that kind of constraint of, how many large boxes do we want to put in a room and, still have a nice looking room. But once you get those in the walls, then usually the aesthetic arguments go away, and then you can really be freed up to get that transducer power you need for that compelling experience.
Sure.
Go big. Because then it doesn't even look big. It's you get to go big and be invisible. I mean, how better is that?
We've already had customers installing 4 of them, and that really ups the dynamic output, and it's an amazing experience. But again, it just speaks to the popularity of this is going to be a great product for us, and it's just catering to a need that's obviously out there.
Yeah,
and you're now already talking me into ordering another one for my music system upstairs, because it's powered speakers are becoming more and more common. I actually have a pair of Beolab 8000s upstairs, and I love the way they sound. I love the way they look. It's a very minimalist configuration upstairs, and they're beautiful speakers that just disappear visually unless you want to see them. This I'm almost wondering if something like this would be a great option for that, because they're powered. I could just run the RCAs out of my preamp into this, and RCAs out of those into the Beolabs, correct?
Yep, you could.
Because the matching Bang & Olufsen sub for the Beolab 8000s is kind of it's a unicorn. They're very hard to find on the used market at a decent price. And so that's another interesting option for using it. I know that bass is bass. It doesn't know, a subwoofer doesn't know if it's hearing music or a movie, but I'm guessing this would be a fantastic sub for a music system.
It would blend well with powered monitors, as Chris was discussing earlier. 3000 InWall is has a extended upper frequency response, great transient response, good dynamic output in the upper bass and lower mid range. So all of those things sort of lend themselves to integrating nicely with powered monitors, most of which have a 5.25-inch woofer or something like that. So you're not going to be running those down to 40 hertz or 50 hertz. It's going to be more 80 or 90 or even 100 hertz.
Interesting. I need to stop doing these videos because they're costing me money.
We'll tighten you up, Travis.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions and allowing us to record it so that we can hopefully answer some other folks' questions. I'm hoping to get this baby installed this weekend. I've got my Arc Genesis mic ready to go on the Anthem. I've got a UMIC one around here somewhere for REW, and I'll be going back and forth and calibrating and configuring and testing it in some different locations. And I'm excited to share those results in a couple weeks, and I should have a nice little installation and review video ready to go as well. So.
Yeah, send on your ARC report, your REW files. Happy to take a look at them, and if anything needs to be tweaked or optimized, happy to assist with that.
Awesome. And Chris, I'll be expecting that new material for the screen very soon.
Not a problem.
I said, the LEDs to go along with it.
LEDs.
Really looking forward to trying this out. It's going to be fun. So. And that is all for us today. And I appreciate everyone watching. And make sure you like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Hit subscribe and ring the bell. That's what YouTubers are supposed to say, right?
Yeah.
You guys have a great day.